From the News Channel 5 Network, this is SportsLine.
Hey there, SportsLine on your television. Steve Layman here with you. Glad you are here with us tonight on News Channel 5. Plus, ready or not, here they come. The Titans report to training camp at St. Thomas Sports Park tomorrow. The first practice of the 2022 season is Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And here we go, training camp. Preseason games coming in just a few weeks, and then, of course, the season kickoff September 11th, Week 1, against the Giants over at Nissan Stadium. High expectations for this Titans team, but definitely some questions about what to think with this group. Offensively, Ryan Tannehill, how does he bounce back from that disastrous game in the playoffs against Cincinnati when he threw 3 interceptions, including the one that set up the walk-off field goal for the Bengals? Can he come back and have a Ryan Tannehill-like season? And the biggest question of all, even if he does that, when they get to the playoffs, can he deliver? That's the question you have right now. If you're a Titans fan or if you're just an NFL fan, looking at Ryan Tannehill as the quarterback of the Titans. He's been largely good. But when they've really, really needed him in the playoffs against the other elite quarterbacks, he's been outplayed. Can he change that this year? What about Derrick Henry, the king? Historically great stretch of about 3 seasons. Second half of 2018, all of 2019, all of 2020, first half of 2021. Not sure you'll find 3 years of better running than Derrick Henry in that stretch. But of course, last year he misses 9 games with the broken right foot, comes back in the playoffs, and he clearly wasn't himself in that game. Maybe cleared from a clean bill of health standpoint, he could get on the field, but he hadn't had the strength, he hadn't been working out in that way, he hadn't been running the football, he was rusty with game action. It was a lot to expect for him to go out and look like the king again in that game. But now he's had an entire offseason where he's been able to get after it and get ready for what is to come. Can he reclaim that form and continue to be the #1 running back in the NFL? Can he try to win a rushing title for the 3rd time in 4 seasons? Can he make another run of 2,000 yards? The questions about how much Derrick Henry can carry the football and how effective he will be is a huge question for the Titans. I think you know he's going to be pretty good, but the question is, can he be historically great? Because that is what he has been, and that may be what this Titans offense demands of Henry this year, because when you look at the passing game, there are a whole bunch of questions there. A.J. Brown's gone. Julio Jones is gone. Robert Woods is in. Treylon Burks is in. But how good can those guys be right out of the chute? Who else will step up at that position besides Nick Westbrook-Akina? Can the tight end position become more of a factor in the passing game again this season with the addition of Austin Hooper and a draft pick in Chig Okonkwo? And what about this offensive line? It has been a strength of the Titans for years now. But there will be 2 new starters on this offensive line. Gone is Roger Saffold. And once again, the Titans are going to introduce a new right tackle. At the moment, it looks like the 2 answers there may be Aaron Brewer at left guard and Dylan Radins at right tackle. Are you comfortable with that? How do you feel about this offensive line and what that means for Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill and this entire offense as a whole? Defensively, the questions are less pressing. 10 starters back, a pass rush that will be healthy and can absolutely get after quarterbacks, depth up front, and several guys in the secondary who can cover, led by, of course, Kevin Byard at safety, Amani Hooker, who's grown up, and then you've got Christian Fulton, Roger McCreary, and Caleb Farley back healthy in that secondary for the Titans. That is the side of the ball that everybody expects is going to have to carry this team, at least in the early going this season. Maybe the offense can identify answers to all those questions that we just asked. Maybe Ryan Tannehill will play his best year, knowing what's in front of him in terms of his contract and his future. Maybe Derrick Henry returns to his 2020 and early 2021 form because he just is a superstar in that reign. Maybe Treylon Burks figures it out and gets on the field and has a productive rookie year. Maybe Robert Woods continues to be healthy or continue to show how healthy he is and how quick of a recoverer he is after tearing his ACL last year to get out on the field and help the Titans passing game immediately. Maybe Austin Hooper is the answer in the red zone for the Titans. Those all could be answers, but it's going to take a little while to figure that out, especially to figure all of them out. The defense the Titans hope is ready right from game number one. And it's probably going to need to be. Because, again, this is a team that's won back-to-back division titles, was the number one seed in the AFC last year, and the expectations are right in that line. They expect to compete for all of those things again and to ultimately compete for a Super Bowl. Can they do it? I don't know. There's a lot of doubters outside because of the way this offseason panned out. But now the offseason's over. Tomorrow morning, they walk into St. Thomas Sports Park, and it is game on, or at least practice on, to start. And we get after it. We figure out what this team is ultimately going to look like. But make no mistake, this team is not showing up just to go through the motions for this year. The goal is to win the division again. The goal is to host another playoff game. The goal is to advance in January and to give themselves a chance to win the Super Bowl. Your thoughts on this Titans team as they get set for the season? 737-7767 is the number. Last night on the Electric Power Company Sunday Sports Central, Jonathan Hutton, our Titans insider, joined us with a bit of a primer for what we can expect, what we should be watching for as practice gets underway when they start Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock, the first of 4 straight days, going at 9 a.m. before the first day off of camp, which comes on Sunday. Here's Jonathan Hutton with JB last night.
We bring in our good buddy, Titans insider and host of Outkick 360, Jonathan Hutton. Jonathan, as the Titans get set to hit the practice field for the first time on Wednesday, what are the storylines you are most interested in as training camp gets started?
The wide receiver position, for one, John, that they traded away their one true playmaker in A.J. Brown. They turned to Robert Woods, who's coming off the ACL injury. Treylon Burks is a rookie who enters with high expectations. They have pieces there, but who is the guy? And who will be the 2 new starters on the offensive line? Right tackle and left guard, both up for grabs. The joint practices between the Bucs and the Cardinals will determine the starters for Week 1 against the New York Giants. And finally, I'm watching the contracts and of a few players. Right as camp gets going, generally that's the last time that we see extensions. Will there be one for Jeffrey Simmons, Derrick Henry? What about other young starters on this team? We'll know that answer this week.
And, Jonathan, every year there are position battles and battles for roster spots. Give me 3 players we should keep an eye on this summer at training camp.
Caleb Farley is an essential piece to their defensive puzzle. All eyes are on him. They returned 10 starters. Farley has elite athletic traits. Can he become a playmaker at corner? If so, this defense can compete against any offense in the NFL. Austin Hooper brings this offense a number 1 tight end. I'm eager to see he and Ryan Tannehill go to work early in camp. And Rashad Weaver, the forgotten guy on defense, he stood out during the preseason at this time last year. Then he broke his fibula early in the season. We now get to see him work behind Landry and Dupree. He's going to get a ton of reps. Can he pick up where he left off?
Can't believe training camp is already here. All right, sit tight, Jay Hutton. More with you coming right up.
Thank you, fellas. Hutton talked a lot about some new faces there, some guys who were around like Caleb Farley last year, other guys who weren't, but guys who weren't on the field for this team last year. And I think that's going to be interesting. I think the other thing to watch for there, whether it be a Farley or a Weaver from last year's class, or you go back a couple of years ago, there's a couple of classes here where you don't have a lot of production from your draft picks. Can the Titans get a little bit more of that? Because they got strapped this year in terms of the salary cap. They're going to get more strapped in terms of the salary cap. Can they get some more production from those guys? Can they get a lot of production from this year's class? Can Treylon Burks be a factor? Can Roger McCreary get on the field quickly for this team? Can Chiga Okonkwo play a factor on that offensive line in blocking situations as a tight end in receiving situations? Can he be a huge part of the Titans offense as a rookie? Can a guy like Dez Fitzpatrick, who wasn't a part of the team last year really, he was on the practice squad after they tried to cut him after a disastrous training camp. He's had a great offseason by all accounts. But has that been good enough to really put him in the mix as we start training camp, as we look forward to the preseason and we get set for the regular season? Can Racing McMath find his way into the rotation? Those are questions I have, because at some point, Titans draft picks have to be more productive than they've been. They haven't been on the field quick enough, they haven't produced enough, and there haven't been enough hits. You'll find a guy here or there. There have been some great picks over the years by John Robinson, but over the last 2 to 3 years, it's been real disappointing to see the level of the hit rate and then the level of production by the draft picks on the field. Will 2022 change that? Can any of the 2020 or 2021 guys that are still around who make amends for what happened in the previous couple of seasons? That, to me, is going to be a key this year for how the Titans are, because they've got to build depth that hasn't been there. And the only real way you can do that in the NFL, given the salary cap and the constraints there, is to draft quality players that can step in effectively but inexpensively early on in their career. Can the Titans get that level of production? We shall see. As we get set for training camp and the preseason, you've got all these guys around the league who've been doing things on their own for the last several months, getting set for this season, getting set to go back and join their teams, getting set for training camp. This is the time of year, up until now, where it's all about the individual. What's going to make you the best? What's going to allow you to take the next step? Starting today, tomorrow, when these teams report and they get on the field, that's when it's all about a team coming together and building the actual squad that's going to take the field in September and beyond, try to win games and try to win a championship. But as we start that process, you start with the individuals. Who are the best players in the NFL? So I thought it would be fun with Hutton to kind of do a bit of an exercise that's kind of from a fantasy sense. We all know what it's like to put together a fantasy team. In this case, it's not going to be for stats, not trying to win the league against your college buddies or your coworkers. But I want Hutton to look at it in a sense of, I'm trying to build the best possible team for the NFL right now. He's not in a GM role where he's got to build out for the future and consider the salary cap or any of that. He just needs to take the best possible person at the positions you're familiar with from typical fantasy league type of stuff and try to put together a team that way. And figure out who's the best quarterback in the NFL right now going into this season. Who's the best running back? What are the best receivers? Who's got the best defense? Those are questions that I think are good starting points. Because I would venture to say that the teams that get mentioned here are going to be pretty good. If you have a skill set that ranks at the top of the league, it's not just going to be that position group that's good. It's going to be your team that's good. So we went through that exercise last night on the Electric Power Company's Sunday Sports Central with Hutton. Jonathan Hutton rejoins us. And Jonathan, all these guys have been working out on their own through the offseason, and now the work of building a team truly starts. So I want you to play GM for us and pick the perfect fantasy team. But in this game, you're not going for fantasy points. You're trying to build the best possible team to win, and for this year only. So you're not thinking long-term with your quarterback pick. You're picking the best guy for this season. Who are you taking?
My quarterback is Josh Allen. He is a superstar that is entering his prime window. And with the dual threat abilities that he would give my team at the quarterback position on top of the clutch moments, We're winning a Super Bowl this season with Josh Allen at quarterback, Steve.
Derrick Henry won back-to-back rushing titles before the foot injury. If he's healthy, are you taking him over the field?
Absolutely. 100%. Derrick Henry's my guy. He remains the king, no matter how much he's being overlooked going into this season. We're not talking long-term, as you said. It's this season. Henry missed 9 games last year, and he finished 9th in the NFL in rushing. And he's a guy that averages 100 yards a game. He's the best at his position.
Okay, this one gets a little more tricky. There's a bunch of talented receivers in the league, but to really have a good passing game, you need more than just one. So I want to have you give us the best wide receiver duo from a team to build our passing attack around.
It could be Miami, but I'm going L.A. I think it's out west with Cooper Kupp and now Allen Robinson. Kupp nearly had his first 2,000-yard season, the first we've ever seen at wide receiver. He nearly got there. He's the most consistent wide receiver in the game today. And then Allen Robinson brings big playability paired with those jump ball skills. And they give, every week, they give Matthew Stafford the ability to attack every inch of that field. That's why they're the best tandem.
We had tight end you here in Nashville last month. Who graduated and makes it onto your team?
Travis Kelce, 20 touchdowns combined over the last 2 years. He's big in the clutch. He remains the best in the game. I want him on my team.
And, of course, you need a defense. Who you got, Hutton?
Dan Quinn's group in Dallas, they get the football back for their offense. They have excellent players at every level of their defense. It starts with Micah Parsons and Diggs. But they're much better than just those two. They're really good.
Ooh, I thought you might go Titans there. I know you're high on them.
Could have, Steve.
Well, those are the players and units to watch as the season begins. Jonathan, we'll see you at camp this week.
Thank you, Steve. And Mark, rest in peace. And Jack, we're thinking about you, man.
For sure. Yeah, well said, Jonathan. I was going to get to that coming up in a few moments. Mark Howard, longtime sports anchor here at News Channel 5, 20 years from 1986 to 2006, passed away yesterday at the age of 65, leaves behind Jack, Rocco, 2 young boys. Not that young anymore, actually, but still his son's part of his family, wife Deborah as well. Certainly our thoughts and prayers are with them and everybody who knew Mark and was around him. I came to News Channel 5 a few years after Mark left, but was around him a lot in the community in terms of sports coverage when he moved to 104.5 The Zone and had the morning show there. I certainly was around him with Predators coverage in his years of hosting pregame and postgame at what then was Fox Sports Tennessee. Mark was just a man about the community, and he was a guy who had as much sports knowledge about local Nashville and Tennessee sports as you'll find. He was just an encyclopedia about this area. And he was a real asset to our community as a sports broadcaster, but he was also a hilariously funny guy. He was really nice. He cared a ton about not just his kids, but others' kids, then did everything possible to try to brighten their day when he could. And it's just an overwhelming loss and a really sad time for a lot of people who knew him. We'll try to get somebody on tomorrow night who has a great relationship with Mark and can tell you a lot more about him and give you some of the intimate details, because I know a lot of you watched him for a long time here and watched him after that with those Predators games and listened to him on the radio, and he's just been an institution in this market for 35 years talking about the Titans and the Predators and Nashville SC and Tennessee and Vanderbilt and all of that stuff, and he was so good at it. And he brought a smile to a lot of people's faces, and he impacted so many. And so certainly our thoughts and prayers to everybody who knew Mark. It's a family here. I don't know how to say it any better than that in a way that you can understand it from the other side. But this station historically has brought people in and kept them for a long period of time. And you can run down the list of anchors who have been at this station for not just 10 or 15 years, but 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years. And Mark Howard was here for 2 decades with a lot of those anchors that made this station what it was and made it the powerhouse that it is today. And he certainly was part of building it. And there's so many people who are still in this building. Anchors, managers, people behind the scenes that worked with him throughout that 20-year process. In our sports department right now, Brian McKeegan, the executive producer, and Bob Cusack, our photographer, both worked with Mark. Bob worked with him every day he was here. All 20 years. That is still here 16 years later. Brian worked with him for, I believe, the last 10 years he was in Nashville. So both of them had long runs with them and know Mark incredibly well. And it's a huge loss here in this building, but it's a huge loss in our community as well. And I certainly want to acknowledge that here tonight. We've got much more we'll get to, talking some college football with Tennessee. We'll hear from Nino Niederreiter, the newest Predator, as well. But as we go to break, remember Mark Howard, gone way too soon and dearly missed.